Okay, so in lesson 611, you divided decimals with whole numbers. This is lesson 612, where we are going to be dividing decimals with decimals. So that means we have an extra step. So if you look at our problem, it's 4 and 68/100 divided by 1 and 3/10. So 1 and 3/10 is our divisor, and it's a decimal number. We cannot have a decimal in our divisor. We can't. No decimal in our divisor. That is, let me write this here. No, oops, that's not very, no decimal. I don't have a typing option, would be easier. In divisor. So since we cannot have a decimal in our divisor, we have another step. We have what's called an equivalent problem. So to make an equivalent problem, we have to do the same thing to our divisor as we do in our dividend. So we have a decimal in our divisor right now. To get rid of the decimal and make it a whole number, you remember in multiplication, we did the same thing. To get rid of our decimal, we need to really move it one place to the right. Make it a big decimal. So now our divisor is 13. But if we're moving the decimal one place to the right in our divisor, we have to do the same thing to our dividend. We have to be fair. So we're moving it one space to the right in our dividend. So now our dividend becomes 46 and 8/10 divided by 13. There's kind of a space there. Let's move that 13 closer. So if you remember when we talked about equivalent fractions, equivalence means it's equal to. So 46 and 8/10 divided by 13, whatever answer we get for that problem is going to be the same answer for 4 and 68/100 divided by 1 and 3/10. They're the same thing here. So you multiplied by a power of 10 to move the decimal. You multiplied by a power of 10 to move the decimal. So since we did the same thing, they're the same problem. Just like a half is also called 2/4, is also called 3/6, is also called 4/8. It is the same thing. So I can now take the equivalent problem and make an estimate. And remember, we are allowed to have decimals in our dividend. We just couldn't in our divisor. So even though there's a decimal still, that's okay. So 46 and 8/10. I would probably say that's pretty close to 50. And then 13, we could say that's pretty close to 10 because 50 divided by 10 divides evenly to get us 5. So then just like yesterday, we can divide it out. 46 and 8/10 and 13. So how many times can 13 go into 4? Oh, it can't. So remember, to keep our place values lined up, you either want to put an X or a 0 above here to keep them lined up. So now let's look at 46. How many times can 13 go into 46? Well, if you're not sure, you can do some side math over here and figure out 13 times 2 gives us 26, so it looks like it could go in one more time. So 13 times 3, if you're not sure, gets us 39. We can't put in another 13 because that would be over. So it can only go in 3 times, which is 39. And subtract. So 16 minus 9. And 3 minus 3. Bring down. Uh-oh, how many times can 13 go into 78? So let's do 13 times 5 over here. See what that is. 15, 65. Uh-oh, it looks like if I do 13 times 6, 18, carry my 1, 6 plus 1, 78. Can go in 6 whole times. 78. Subtract. I have no remainder, so I don't need to make it into a fraction. And then our last step is to bring the decimal up. So my answer is 3 and 6/10. And then that's going to be my answer for this one also, because they're equivalent, 3 and 6/10, which is close to 5. So when you're dividing with a decimal, there's one additional step. You have to make sure that there's no decimal in your divisor. If there is, you need to get it off to a whole number. So if I had to move it 2 times, then that means I'd have to move it 2 times in my dividend. Here I moved it once, so it means I have to move it once in my dividend. So that's what an equivalent problem is just your problem with no decimal in your divisor. So let's go ahead and open up your math journal page to 227. There are actually only 2 problems in this lesson, so I'm only going to do one with you, and then I'll have you do number 2 on your own, and then you'll have your home link also to practice. So let's open up to 227. So it says for problems 1 and 2, write an equivalent division problem that has a whole number divisor. Be sure to multiply the dividend and divisor by the same number. Meaning if you're moving the decimal one place in your divisor, you need to move it one place in your dividend. Make an estimate for your equivalent problem. Divide as if you would divide with a whole number to solve your equivalent problem. Use your estimate to place the decimal point, and complete the number sentence to show the answer to the equivalent problem in the original problem. So we're going to look at 1. 2 and 79/100 divided by 9/10. So there is a decimal in my divisor. It's okay to have a decimal here in my dividend, but I cannot have a decimal in my divisor. So that means I have to move my decimal one space to make that a whole number of 9. But remember, I have to do the same thing to my dividend. So since I moved my decimal one space to the right, I have to move my decimal one space to the right in my dividend. So my equivalent problem is going to be 27 and 9/10 divided by 9 is, I'm not sure. We'll figure that out. So now 27 and 9/10 divided by 9 is what I'm going to make an estimate for. So 27 and 9/10, pretty close to 30. And 9 is pretty close to 10, so that would make an easy estimate. Of 3. So now we go ahead and divide our equivalent problem. Remember, whatever the answer to the equivalent problem is also going to be the answer to our original problem, hence the name equivalent. So set up our problem. Nine can go into 2 how many times? Well, it can't, so I'm going to put a 0 here or an X here to keep it lined up. 9 can go into 27 how many times? Can go into 27 3 times. So 3 times 9 is 27. So if I subtract, I bring down, how many times can 9 go into 9? Once. 9 times 1 is 9. Subtract. And I have a remainder of nothing and nothing else to bring down. So now I go back up, and remember, since I have it all nice and lined up, I can bring my decimal straight up to get 3 and 1/10, which, if I check it with my estimate, that is close to 3. Then at the bottom, they want us to write the answer to the equivalent problem. So our equivalent problem was 27 and 9/10 divided by 9 equals 3 and 1/10. So that means 2 and 79/100 divided by 9/10 equals 3 and 1/10 because they're equivalent. They're equal to each other. So now I'd like you to try 2 on your own, but now that I'm looking at it, it's a little tricky. So we'll set up the equivalent problem together, and then you can try the rest on your own. So it's 85 and 4/10 divided by 14/100. So we cannot have a decimal in our divisor. So we need to get rid of this decimal and make 14/100 into a whole number. So if I move the decimal just one spot, that makes it 1 and 4/10. That's still not a whole number. So I have to move the decimal 2 spots to make it 14. So that's really saying you're multiplying by 10 to the power of 2. You moved it 2 spots to the right. So then you have to do the same thing. I'm going to put times 10 to the power of 2 up here to remind us that's what we really did. So we have to do the same thing to our dividend. So if I move my decimal 1 spot to the right, and then the second spot to the right. So this goes back all the way to the beginning of Unit 6. What do we need to fill in with that empty spot there? Because there's a 4 here, but then here we have to put a number. So it actually becomes 8,540 divided by 14. That is our equivalent problem. So since we had to move the decimal 2 spots to the right in our divisor, we have to do the same in our dividend. So now you have your equivalent problem, make your estimate and solve it, and see if you get the correct answer. Remember, you can always do your work on a separate sheet of paper if you prefer not doing it on the computer, or if you have your math journal, you can do it in there. That would be easiest. Remember to check your work when you are done with the answer key.